Billionaire woman mocks single dad mid-flight. Captain suddenly shouts, "Is there a fighter pilot here?" Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below. The champagne bubbled softly in Victoria Sterling's crystal flute as she reclined in her first-class seat, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against the Italian leather armrest. At 27, she commanded a billion-dollar tech empire with the same ruthless efficiency her father had taught her before his death. Her Hermès suit, custom-tailored in Paris, caught the afternoon light streaming through the aircraft window as Flight 447 prepared for its journey from New York to Miami. 3 rows ahead, Marcus Thompson helped his 7-year-old daughter Emma buckle into her seat. His weathered hands, marked by years of hard work, contrasted sharply with the pristine luxury surrounding them. His flannel shirt, though clean and pressed, seemed almost defiant among the designer clothing of fellow first-class passengers. Emma clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, her eyes wide with wonder at the opulent cabin. "Daddy, look at all the tiny bottles," Emma whispered excitedly, pointing at the minibar. Her auburn curls bounced as she twisted in her seat, trying to see everything at once. Marcus smiled, the lines around his green eyes deepening. "Pretty fancy, isn't it, sweetheart? Remember what we talked about. Best behavior, okay?" Victoria's attention snapped to the pair like a predator sensing weakness. She studied Marcus's appearance with calculating eyes, the frayed edges of his shirt collar, the discount store watch on his wrist, the careful way he handled the expensive surroundings as if afraid to break something. Her lips curved into a sardonic smile. "Excuse me," Victoria called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The entire first-class cabin seemed to pause, recognizing the tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm curious, did you win some sort of contest? A charity auction, perhaps?" Marcus turned slowly, meeting her gaze with steady eyes. "I'm sorry?" "Oh, don't be sorry." Victoria laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of warmth. "I'm genuinely curious how someone in your circumstances thought he managed to afford first-class tickets. They're nearly $10,000 each." She gestured at his clothing with her champagne flute. "That shirt alone tells me this must have cost you several months' salary." Emma shrank against her father, clutching Mr. Peanuts tighter. The elephant's button eyes seemed to stare accusingly at Victoria. "We're paying customers same as you," Marcus replied quietly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Of course you are," Victoria continued, enjoying the attention of other passengers now watching the exchange. "I just hope you didn't mortgage your mobile home? Trailer? Whatever it is you live in. These experiences can be quite addictive, you know. False hope and all that." A businessman across the aisle chuckled nervously. Victoria Sterling's reputation preceded her, the youngest female CEO in the Fortune 500, known for her brilliant mind and cutting tongue. When she drew blood, it was sport. "Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging on Marcus's sleeve. "Why is the pretty lady being mean?" The question, innocent and clear in the quiet cabin, caused several passengers to shift uncomfortably. Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment before hardening into something crueler. "Mean? Oh, sweetheart. I'm not being mean. I'm being realistic. Your daddy should teach you about the real world. How some people belong in certain places and others don't." She turned back to Marcus. "What do you do for a living anyway? Construction? Retail? Let me guess. You saved for years for this little adventure." Marcus's hands clenched slightly, but his voice remained level. "I work at a small airport. Maintenance." "Maintenance!" Victoria exclaimed with delight. "How perfectly modest. Cleaning bathrooms and emptying trash cans to give your daughter a taste of luxury she'll never have again. It's almost cruel, don't you think? Like showing a starving person a feast they can't eat." "You don't know anything about us," Marcus said softly, pulling Emma closer. "Oh, but I do," Victoria insisted, warming to her theme. "I know you're the type who thinks scrimping and saving for one grand gesture makes you a hero. But what happens tomorrow when she asks why she can't fly first class to school? When she realizes this was just pretend, like that ratty stuffed animal she's clutching?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Peanuts isn't ratty." The cabin fell silent except for the hum of engines. Even the flight attendants, trained to handle difficult passengers, seemed unsure how to intervene when the difficult passenger was Victoria Sterling, whose company's corporate account alone was worth millions to the airline. Marcus stood slowly, his 6-foot frame unfolding with controlled grace. For a moment, something flashed in his eyes, something that made Victoria unconsciously press back into her seat. But he simply picked up Emma, who buried her face in his shoulder. "Come on, baby girl, let's go see if the nice flight attendant can show you the cockpit before we take off." "But Daddy, our seats—" "We'll come back, Emma. I promise." He looked at Victoria one last time. "Enjoy your champagne, Miss Sterling. I hope it tastes as sweet as you imagined." Victoria watched them walk toward the front of the plane, irritation replacing her amusement. How dare he dismiss her like that? She was Victoria Sterling. People didn't walk away from her. She flagged down a flight attendant. "That man and his daughter, are they really supposed to be in first class? Perhaps you should verify their tickets." The attendant's smile was professionally frozen. "I'll certainly check, Ms. Sterling, though I can assure you all our passengers are properly ticketed." As the plane began its taxi to the runway, Victoria settled back with satisfaction. She'd made her point. People like Marcus Thompson needed to understand their place in the world, and it wasn't next to people like her. 20 minutes into the flight, as they reached cruising altitude, Victoria had already forgotten about the maintenance worker and his daughter. She was reviewing acquisition proposals on her tablet, occasionally sipping champagne and making notes that would determine the fate of hundreds of employees at smaller companies. Emma and Marcus had returned to their seats quietly. The little girl colored in a book while Marcus stared out the window, his expression unreadable. The other first-class passengers had resumed their own bubbles of privilege, the earlier tension dissolving into the ambient noise of wealth and comfort. That's when the first alarm went off. It started as a subtle change in the engine's pitch, something only a trained ear might notice. Marcus's head snapped up immediately, his body tensing like a soldier hearing distant gunfire. The plane shuddered slightly, causing drinks to slosh and a few overhead compartments to pop open. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom, professionally calm but with an underlying edge. "We're experiencing some minor turbulence. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened." But Marcus was already moving, his eyes scanning the cabin ceiling as if he could see through it to the mechanical systems beyond. He gently but quickly secured Emma's seatbelt tighter and positioned Mr. Peanuts in her lap. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was small. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just like we practiced in our safety games, remember?" The plane shuddered again, more violently this time. Victoria's tablet slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. Her champagne glass followed, shattering against the armrest and splashing vintage Dom Perignon across her designer suit. "What the hell?" she began, but her words were cut off by a sound that made every passenger's blood run cold. The sudden, complete silence of the left engine dying. The aircraft immediately listed to one side. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments like yellow jellyfish, dancing in the chaos. Passengers screamed, some praying, others crying. The professional calm of the first-class cabin evaporated into primal fear. But Marcus Thompson didn't panic. He moved with the fluid precision of someone who had trained for this moment 1,000 times. He had Emma's oxygen mask on her face before most passengers had even reached for theirs. His hands steady and sure. "Breathe normal, baby girl. Just like swimming underwater, remember? Nice and easy." The intercom crackled to life again, but this time the captain's voice had lost its professional veneer. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're declaring an emergency. We've lost our left engine and—" A pause, filled with static and something that sounded horribly like confusion. "We're experiencing multiple system failures. Flight crew, emergency positions." Victoria fumbled with her oxygen mask, her fingers suddenly clumsy with terror. The acquisition proposals, the billion-dollar empire, the designer suit. None of it mattered now. She was just another human being trapped in a metal tube falling from the sky. Through her panic, she saw Marcus Thompson standing in the aisle, steady as a rock while the plane bucked and shook around him. He wasn't putting on his own oxygen mask. Instead, He was looking toward the cockpit with an expression she couldn't read, determination mixed with something that looked almost like resignation. A flight attendant stumbled past, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead where she'd hit an overhead bin. Marcus caught her arm, steadying her. "What's the real situation?" he asked, his voice cutting through the chaos with quiet authority. The attendant looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Both pilots." The captain collapsed. "First officer is trying to, but he's sick too. Food poisoning, we think. We need—" She didn't need to finish. The plane lurched again, harder this time, and the remaining engine began to sputter. That's when the impossible request came over the intercom. The first officer's voice high with barely controlled panic. "Is there anyone on board who can fly? Any pilots? Military? Commercial? Anything? Please, we need—" The transmission cut to static. In the chaos, as passengers screamed and prayed, as the aircraft began its inexorable descent, Marcus Thompson looked down at his daughter one last time. Emma was watching him with those green eyes so like his own, trusting him completely even as their world literally fell apart around them. "I'll be right back, baby girl," he said softly. "Remember what I taught you about being brave?" Emma nodded solemnly, clutching Mr. Peanuts. "Heroes do what's right, even when they're scared. That's my girl." He kissed her forehead, then turned toward the cockpit. Victoria Sterling, struggling with her oxygen mask, saw him start to move. Their eyes met across the chaos. The billionaire who had everything and the maintenance man who supposedly had nothing. In that moment, as death approached at 500 miles per hour, she saw something in his eyes that made her earlier words turn to ash in her mouth. He unbuttoned his flannel shirt as he walked, revealing what he wore beneath. Victoria's eyes widened. Even in the dim emergency lighting, even through her oxygen-deprived haze, she could see them clearly. Military medals. Not just any medals. The Distinguished Flying Cross, the Silver Star, a Purple Heart. The maintenance man she'd mocked, the father she'd humiliated, wore the decorations of a genuine war hero across his chest. As Marcus Thompson moved toward the cockpit with the steady grace of someone who had faced death before and won, Victoria Sterling realized with crystalline clarity that she had no idea who this man really was. But she was about to find out. The cockpit door burst open under Marcus Thompson's shoulder, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Warning lights painted the cramped space in reds and ambers while alarms competed for attention in a symphony of impending disaster. The captain lay slumped sideways in his seat, unconscious, while the first officer clutched his stomach with one hand and fought the control yoke with the other. "Thank God," the first officer gasped, his face gray with illness and fear. "Are you a pilot?" Marcus was already moving, his trained eyes taking in the instrument panel in a single sweep. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson, retired, Air Force, 11 years flying F-16s. He gently but quickly moved the unconscious captain aside. "What's your status?" "Food poisoning. Both of us. Can barely—" The first officer lurched forward, retching. "Lost left engine. Hydraulics failing. We're at 31,000 feet descending, can't maintain—" "I've got it," Marcus said, sliding into the captain's seat with practiced ease. His hands moved across the controls like a pianist returning to a familiar melody. "You focus on breathing. What's our nearest airport?" "Charleston, maybe 90 miles. But with one engine and these hydraulics, we'll make it." Marcus's voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had flown damaged aircraft before, who had brought burning jets home on prayer and skill alone. "Get me current weather for Charleston and any alternate sites." Back in the cabin, Victoria Sterling watched through the open cockpit door as the maintenance man she'd mocked took command of their fate. The transformation was stunning. Gone was the quiet father who'd absorbed her insults without retaliation. In his place sat a warrior, his movements economical and precise, speaking in the clipped professional tones of someone born to crisis. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus's voice came over the intercom, steady as granite. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Thompson. I'm a military pilot with over 5,000 flight hours. We've lost an engine and have some mechanical issues, but this aircraft is still flyable. I need everyone to remain calm and follow your flight attendant's instructions exactly. We're diverting to Charleston, ETA approximately 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Victoria clutched her armrest, her knuckles white. 20 minutes to live or die, and their lives rested in the hands of the man whose worth she'd measured by his clothing. Emma Thompson sat 3 rows ahead, her oxygen mask slightly too big for her small face, making her look even younger than her 7 years. But she wasn't crying. She held Mr. Peanuts close and watched the cockpit where her father had disappeared with the absolute faith only a child could muster. "He's going to save us," Emma said to the terrified passenger beside her voice muffled by the mask but clear in its certainty. "My daddy's the best pilot in the whole world. He saved lots of people before." The passenger, a middle-aged businessman who'd chuckled at Victoria's earlier mockery, now clung to the child's words like a lifeline. "Your father's a pilot?" Emma nodded proudly. "He flew fighting planes, fast ones. He has medals and everything, but he keeps them in a box because he says heroes don't need to show off." In the cockpit, Marcus fought to stabilize the dying aircraft. "The 737 wanted to roll left with only one engine, and the failing hydraulics made every control input a suggestion rather than a command." Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands remained rock steady. "Come on, beautiful," he murmured to the plane, coaxing it like a spooked horse. "You've got one more landing in you." The first officer, despite his illness, watched in awe. "You've flown commercial before?" "No," Marcus admitted, making another minute adjustment. "But I've brought home F-16s with half a wing missing. Same principles apply. Physics doesn't care what kind of plane you're in." "Charleston Tower," Marcus radioed. "This is Flight 447 declaring emergency. Single engine operation, hydraulic failure, 2 souls in cockpit incapacitated. I'm a military pilot, type rated on fighters only. Request emergency landing, all available equipment." The radio crackled. "Flight 447, Charleston Tower. Understand your emergency. You're cleared for immediate approach runway 27. Emergency equipment standing by. Do you need vectors?" "Negative, Charleston. I've got the field in sight." This was a lie. They were still too far out, but Marcus knew that confidence was half of flying. If you sounded like you knew what you were doing, you were halfway to actually doing it. Back in the cabin, the flight attendants moved with professional efficiency despite their fear. One of them, the senior attendant whom Victoria recognized from countless flights, paused by her seat. "Ms. Sterling, I need you to remove your jewelry and high heels. Put them in the seat pocket." Victoria numbly complied, her fingers fumbling with her Cartier watch. "Who is he? That man?" The attendant glanced toward the cockpit. "I don't know, but thank God he was on board." She moved on, repeating crash landing instructions that everyone hoped wouldn't be necessary. The plane shuddered again, and this time the remaining engine coughed. Marcus felt it through the throttle, the beginning of fuel starvation. The damaged systems were failing in cascade, each failure triggering the next. "How much fuel?" he asked the first officer. "Should be plenty, but the gauges are acting erratic. Crossfeed might be compromised." Marcus did quick calculations. 90 miles to Charleston, current altitude and descent rate. One engine starting to fail. In an F-16, he'd have ejected by now. But there were no ejection seats for the 174 souls on board this aircraft. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice still impossibly calm, "we're beginning our descent into Charleston. It's going to be bumpy and we're coming in faster than normal. When I give the word, I need everyone in brace position. Flight attendants, prepare for emergency landing." Victoria found herself staring at little Emma Thompson, who had pulled out what looked like a photograph from her backpack. Even from 3 rows back, Victoria could see it was a picture of Marcus in a flight suit, standing next to a fighter jet, his arms around a beautiful woman with Emma's same auburn hair. The child kissed the photo and tucked it back safe. Then she positioned Mr. Peanuts carefully, making sure he was secure for landing. Her movements were practiced, as if she'd rehearsed this very scenario. "Your daddy taught you well," the businessman beside Emma said softly. "We practice emergency stuff," Emma replied matter-of-factly. Daddy says being prepared isn't being scared. It's being smart. Mommy used to say the same thing before she went to heaven. Victoria's throat tightened. The child's mother was dead. The man she'd accused of false heroics was a widowed single father, raising his daughter alone while working maintenance at some small airport. And yet he'd somehow afforded first-class tickets. The plane lurched violently, snapping Victoria from her thoughts. Outside the windows, the ground was visible now, rushing up to meet them far too fast. The remaining engine was sputtering, fighting for life. In the cockpit, Marcus Thompson was flying on instinct and experience, his hands and feet dancing across controls as he fought to keep 70 tons of aluminum and fuel in the air for just a few minutes more. The hydraulics were nearly gone. He had to muscle every control movement, using strength and trim tabs to maintain something resembling controlled flight. Charleston Tower, Flight 447. We're losing the second engine. Request straight-in approach, no turns. Roger 4A47. You're cleared for whatever you need. The whole field is yours. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. In combat, they called this flying on fumes and prayers. He'd done it before over Afghanistan, nursing a shot-up Viper home with half his systems dead and his wingman already ejected. But that was a nimble fighter with one soul on board. This was a flying bus full of terrified civilians, including his daughter. His daughter. Marcus forced the thought away. He couldn't think about Emma right now, couldn't let emotion cloud his judgment. She was just another passenger, another life depending on his skill. The fact that she was his entire world. The only thing that had kept him going after Sarah's death, the reason he'd taken this trip in the first place, none of that mattered now. 15 miles. The first officer reported, his voice stronger now as adrenaline overcame nausea. Can we make it? We'll make it, Marcus said. He didn't add that making the field and landing successfully were two very different things. Without hydraulics, he had minimal control. They'd hit hard and fast. The landing gear might not hold, the plane might break apart, but they'd make the field. He'd promised Emma he'd be right back, and Marcus Thompson kept his promises. Flight attendants, brace for impact in 2 minutes, he announced. Everyone assume crash positions now. In the cabin, 174 people folded forward, heads between knees, hands clasped behind necks. The tough businessman was crying. A young couple held hands across the aisle. Someone was praying in Spanish. Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO, master of the universe, found herself thinking not of her company or her wealth or her achievements, but of her parents. They died in a plane crash when she was 22, leaving her an empire she'd spent 5 years growing with ruthless determination. She'd become hard because the world was hard. She'd become cruel because kindness was weakness. Now facing her own death in the sky, she wondered if they'd be proud of who she'd become. Through the gap in the seats, she could see Emma Thompson in perfect brace position, Mr. Peanut secured under the seat. The child wasn't crying. She was holding that photo of her parents, lips moving in what might have been prayer or simply words of love to the mother she'd lost, and the father who was fighting to save them all. The runway appeared in the windscreen like a promise. Marcus had coaxed every last ounce of power from the dying engine, trading altitude for airspeed in a delicate dance with physics. They were coming in hot, too hot. But it was that or fall short of the runway entirely. Gear down, he ordered. Down. The first officer flipped the switches. They waited. The hydraulic system groaned, struggled, and finally responded. 3 green lights. The landing gear was down and locked. One small miracle in a day that desperately needed them. You've got this, the first officer said quietly. Marcus didn't respond. His entire world had narrowed to the runway ahead, the feel of the dying aircraft in his hands, the countless calculations running through his mind. Airspeed, altitude, descent rate, crosswind, weight distribution. In the F-16, he'd have a heads-up display feeding him data. Here he had analog instruments and instinct. The ground rushed up. The runway grew larger. In the cabin, someone screamed. Marcus Thompson, war hero, single father, airport maintenance worker, wrapped his hands around the control yoke and prepared to do what he'd always done, whatever it took to bring his people home. The wheels touched concrete with a shriek of protest that seemed to go on forever. The 737 hit the runway at 40 knots above normal landing speed, bouncing once before Marcus forced it back down with sheer determination and what remained of the flight controls. The aircraft shuddered and groaned, every rivet straining against forces it was never designed to handle. "Reverse thrust," Marcus commanded, though he was already pulling the levers himself. The remaining engine roared in protest, trying to slow 70 tons of metal traveling at nearly 200 miles per hour. In the cabin, the impact threw passengers hard against their seatbelts despite the brace position. Overhead compartments burst open, spilling luggage into the aisles. The noise was deafening, engines screaming, tires smoking, the airframe itself crying out in metallic agony. Victoria Sterling's world became a chaos of sound and motion. The designer lifestyle, the corporate victories, the careful construction of her public image, all of it stripped away in seconds, leaving only the primitive desire to survive. Through it all, she could hear Emma Thompson's voice clear and high. "It's okay, Mr. Peanuts. Daddy's got us." The plane slewed sideways as the nose gear finally gave way under the stress. Marcus fought the yaw with rudder pedals that barely responded. Keeping the aircraft on the runway through will more than aerodynamics. Sparks flew past the windows as metal met concrete. Fire trucks raced alongside, their crews watching in professional horror as the wounded bird struggled to stop. "Come on," Marcus muttered through gritted teeth. "Hold together. Just a little more." The first officer watched the airspeed indicator with wide eyes. 120, 100, 80. They were running out of runway. The orange markers indicating the approaching overrun zone flashed past. Beyond that, a chain-link fence and a drainage ditch that would tear the aircraft apart. Marcus made a decision. He pulled the mixture levers, killing the engine entirely, and stood on what remained of the brakes. The plane shuddered, slowed, and finally, impossibly, stopped. Silence fell like a physical weight. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. They were down. They were alive. Then the cabin erupted. Cheers, sobs, prayers of gratitude in a dozen languages. The flight attendants were already moving, professional training overriding their own shock. "Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Leave all belongings. Exit rows. Open your doors." The emergency slides deployed with explosive hisses. Passengers who minutes ago had been separated by class and circumstance now helped each other toward the exits. The businessman lifted Emma Thompson, passing her carefully to waiting arms. A young man in coach helped an elderly woman from first class who couldn't walk on shaking legs. Victoria found herself at an exit, the flight attendant directing traffic with crisp efficiency. She turned back looking for the cockpit and saw Marcus Thompson emerging. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading, but he moved with purpose toward his daughter. "Daddy." Emma launched herself into his arms as soon as she saw him. "You did it. I knew you would." Marcus held her tight, his eyes closed, and for the first time Victoria saw the emotion he'd been holding back. His shoulders shook slightly as he buried his face in his daughter's hair. "Sir, we need to evacuate," a flight attendant said gently. Marcus nodded, lifting Emma easily. As he turned toward the exit, his eyes met Victoria's. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the man she'd humiliated and the woman who'd done it. Then he moved past without a word, carrying his daughter to safety. Victoria slid down the evacuation slide in her stockings, her designer heels left behind as per instructions. The concrete was hot under her feet, but she barely noticed. She was alive. They were all alive because a maintenance worker had once flown fighter jets. Emergency crews swarmed the aircraft. Passengers were herded toward buses, but Victoria hung back, watching Marcus set Emma down near an ambulance. The child was chattering excitedly to a paramedic about how her daddy was the best pilot ever, waving Mr. Peanuts for emphasis. "Ma'am, we need to check you for injuries." A firefighter approached Victoria. "I'm fine," she said absently. "That man, the one who landed the plane." The firefighter followed her gaze. "Hell of a thing. Heard the tower communications. Guy saved everyone on board. He shook his head in amazement. Single engine, no hydraulics, civilian aircraft he'd never flown before. That's not skill, that's a miracle. Victoria watched as an official-looking man in an FAA windbreaker approached Marcus, who was kneeling beside Emma while a paramedic checked her over. Whatever the official said made Marcus shake his head, gesturing toward his daughter. The official persisted, clearly wanting statements, debriefs, explanations. But Marcus's priority was clear. Emma first, everything else second. "Miss Sterling?" Victoria turned to find her assistant James rushing toward her. Somehow he'd already made it to Charleston, probably via the company jet the moment news of the emergency broke. "Thank God you're all right," James said, holding out a phone. "The board is in emergency session. The press wants statements. We need to control the narrative immediately." "Not now." Victoria heard herself say the words as if from a distance. "But ma'am, the stock price—" "I said not now." She walked away from him, toward the small cluster of first-class passengers gathering near one of the buses. Many were on their phones, already spinning their survival stories. But the businessman who'd sat near Emma was standing apart, staring at the damaged aircraft with hollow eyes. 40 years of flying, he said to no one in particular. 40 years, and I've never been that scared. His daughter knew, Victoria found herself saying. She knew he'd save us. The man turned to her, recognizing the woman who'd started this flight with such cruel confidence. "I laughed," he admitted quietly. "When you were—" I laughed. God help me, I thought it was funny. They stood in shared shame, watching Marcus Thompson talk quietly with investigators while never letting Emma out of his sight. Other passengers approached him, to shake his hand, to thank him, to touch the man who'd brought them home. He accepted their gratitude with quiet grace, but his attention always returned to his daughter. "I need to apologize," Victoria said suddenly. The businessman shook his head. "You think he cares about your apology? Look at him. We never existed for him except as lives to save. The rest of it, your words, your mockery, that's just noise." But Victoria was already walking toward Marcus and Emma. Her bare feet hurt on the hot concrete. Her designer suit was ruined, and she'd never felt smaller in her life. As she approached, Emma noticed her first. "Daddy, it's the lady from the plane." The child's voice was neutral, watchful. Marcus looked up from the form he was signing. His expression gave away nothing. "Mr. Thompson," Victoria began, then stopped. What could she possibly say? That she was sorry for judging him by his appearance? For trying to humiliate him in front of his daughter? For being everything wrong with the world he'd fought to protect? "You should get checked by the medics," Marcus said quietly. That was a hard landing. "I need to say, no," he interrupted gently. "You don't. We're alive. That's all that matters." He turned back to Emma. "Ready to go, baby girl? They're going to give us a ride to a hotel." "Can we get ice cream?" Emma asked hopefully. "I think we've earned ice cream," Marcus agreed, lifting her into his arms. He nodded politely to Victoria. "Have a safe rest of your trip, Ms. Sterling." They walked away, leaving Victoria standing alone on the tarmac. Around her, the aftermath of near disaster played out in organized chaos. News crews were arriving, investigators swarmed the wounded aircraft, and somewhere a reporter was already calling Marcus Thompson an American hero. But Victoria saw only the quiet man walking away with his daughter, who had saved 174 lives and asked for nothing in return, who had been judged and found wanting by someone who measured worth in dollars and status, who had revealed her smallness not through words, but through actions. Her phone buzzed. James again, probably with urgent business that had seemed so important just hours ago. She ignored it, watching until Marcus and Emma disappeared into one of the transport vehicles. It wasn't until she was sitting in her own transport, heading to the same hotel as the other passengers, that Victoria noticed Emma had left something behind. On the ground where they'd been standing lay a folded piece of paper. Victoria picked it up, recognizing it as the photo Emma had been holding during the landing. But when she unfolded it, she realized it wasn't a photo at all. It was a printed email, worn soft from repeated handling. "Dear Ms. Sterling, It began in a child's careful handwriting that had been scanned and sent electronically. My name is Emma Thompson, and I am 7 years old. My daddy is the best pilot in the world, but he works fixing planes now because he says that's important too. I read about your company in my school library. You help people find jobs with computers. My daddy needs a better job so we can stay in our house. He has lots of medals from being brave, but he won't tell anyone. I can send you pictures if you want proof. Please help my daddy. He won't ask for help because he says heroes don't complain. But I'm not a hero yet, so I can ask. Thank you. Love, Emma. At the bottom was an adult's note in different handwriting. Email bounced back. CEO address not public. We'll try again through corporate channels. Victoria stared at the letter, her throat tight. This child had been trying to reach her. The great Victoria Sterling, to ask for help for her hero father. And today Victoria had stood in first class and mocked them both for daring to exist in her presence. She carefully refolded the letter and held it close, her hands shaking now with something more than post-adrenaline crash. Marcus Thompson hadn't just saved her life. In the space of 20 minutes, he'd shown her exactly what kind of person she'd become. And Victoria Sterling, for the first time in years, didn't like what she saw. The Charleston Harbor Hotel buzzed with the controlled chaos of 174 unexpected guests. The airline had booked the entire 5th floor, and traumatized passengers milled about the lobby in various states of shock and relief. News vans clustered outside like predators sensing a story, their reporters interviewing anyone willing to talk about the miraculous emergency landing. Victoria Sterling sat alone in her suite, the crumpled letter from Emma Thompson spread on the mahogany desk before her. She'd read it 17 times now, each word a small knife twisting deeper. The timestamp showed it had been sent 6 months ago. 6 months of a little girl trying to help her father, meeting only silence. Her phone rang incessantly. The board, investors, media consultants, everyone wanted Victoria Sterling's statement on her near-death experience. But for once, the woman who lived by controlling every narrative had no words. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She ignored it, as she'd ignored the last 5. But this visitor was persistent. Ms. Sterling, it's David Chen from the NTSB. I need to speak with you about the incident. An investigator. She couldn't ignore that. Victoria smoothed her hair, a reflexive gesture, though she'd long since abandoned any pretense of her usual polish, and opened the door. The man who stood there was younger than she'd expected, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm interviewing all first-class passengers about the events leading up to the emergency. I don't see how that's relevant, Victoria said, but stepped aside to let him in. Everything's relevant in an investigation, ma'am. May I? He gestured to a chair. At her nod, he sat and pulled out a tablet. I understand you had an interaction with Lieutenant Colonel Thompson before the incident. Victoria's stomach clenched. Interaction? Multiple passengers mentioned an exchange between you two. Something about questioning how he could afford first-class tickets. Chen's tone was professionally neutral, but his eyes were sharp. I may have made some assumptions based on appearance. I see. Chen made a note. Were you aware that Colonel Thompson was traveling on tickets purchased by the Make-A-Wish Foundation? The world tilted. What? His daughter Emma has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, in remission for 2 years? But the foundation fulfilled her wish to fly first class, like a princess to see the ocean. Chen watched her reaction clinically. The foundation often upgrades military families. Colonel Thompson initially refused, but Emma insisted. Victoria sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. The cheerful little girl with the bright eyes and boundless faith in her father was fighting cancer, had fought cancer, while Victoria had mocked them for daring to exist in her space. I need to ask about Colonel Thompson's demeanor before the emergency, Chen continued. Did he seem impaired in any way? Distracted, angry? No, Victoria whispered. He was calm, protective of his daughter, professional even when She couldn't finish. Chen made more notes. For what it's worth, Ms. Sterling, you weren't the only one who misjudged him. The airline almost didn't let him in the cockpit post 9/11 protocols. It wasn't until he showed his military ID and the first officer recognized his name that they understood who they had on board. Recognized his name? Marcus Thompson, the Kandahar Miracle. At her blank look, Chen elaborated. 8 years ago, Captain Thompson, as he was then, saved an entire forward operating base. Landed a damaged C-130 under heavy fire to evacuate wounded soldiers, then went back. 3 times. 57 people owe him their lives. The last trip, his aircraft was so damaged it never flew again. He earned the Silver Star, among other decorations. Victoria thought of the medals hidden beneath the flannel shirt, revealed only when death was imminent. He left the Air Force shortly after. Chen continued. Personal reasons, the record says. Took a job at a small municipal airport in Ohio. Maintenance crew, sometimes flight instruction. Makes about $40,000 a year. From hero pilot to airport maintenance. From saving soldiers in combat to fixing small planes in Ohio. And he'd never said a word, never defended himself against her assumptions. The thing is, Chen said, closing his tablet, we've had 5 different airlines offer him jobs in the last 6 hours. Major carriers offering captain positions. 6-figure salaries, he's turned them all down. Why? He says he needs to get his daughter home, that's it. No interviews, no photo ops, no capitalizing on being a hero. Again. Chen stood to leave, then paused. You asked about his demeanor, Miss Sterling. In my experience interviewing hundreds of passengers after incidents, I can tell you what stood out about Colonel Thompson. He never mentioned what you said to him, not once. When I asked if anything had upset him before the flight, he said, no, it was a perfect day. I was with my daughter. After Chen left, Victoria sat in the gathering dusk, Emma's letter in her hands. A 7-year-old fighting cancer had tried to help her hero father find a better job, had reached out to the powerful Victoria Sterling for help. And today, that father had saved Victoria's life without hesitation, without expectation of reward or recognition. She picked up her phone and dialed. James? Cancel everything for the next week. Yes, everything. And I need you to find out everything about a Make-A-Wish trip for Emma Thompson. Quietly. 2 floors down, Marcus Thompson sat on the hotel bed watching Emma sleep. She'd crashed hard after the excitement. Mr. Peanuts clutched to her chest. The doctors had checked her thoroughly. The stress of the emergency landing could have been dangerous given her medical history. But Emma was tougher than she looked. She always had been. His phone vibrated. Another text from another airline. This one offering not just a job but relocation assistance. Signing bonus. Full medical benefits. Marcus deleted it like the others. He couldn't go back to flying commercial. The hours, the time away from Emma. Impossible. She needed stability, routine, the careful monitoring that had kept the cancer from returning. His job at the municipal airport was perfect. Home by 6 every night, weekends free, good insurance through the county. It didn't matter that he was wasting his skills or that they lived paycheck to paycheck. Emma came first. Emma always came first. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Marcus moved quietly to the door, not wanting to wake his daughter. The woman standing in the hallway looked nothing like the polished CEO from the plane. Victoria Sterling wore jeans and a hotel-branded t-shirt, her feet bare, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She held a tray with 2 cups of coffee and a hot chocolate. I thought, she started, then stopped. Then, may I come in? Marcus glanced back at Emma, still sleeping. He stepped into the hallway, pulling the door most of the way closed. She needs her rest, he explained. Of course. Victoria offered him one of the coffees. I wasn't sure how you took it. Black seemed like a safe guess. He accepted the cup but said nothing. Waiting. I know about the Make-A-Wish, Victoria said quietly. About Emma's illness, about everything. It's not a secret, Marcus replied. Just not relevant to most conversations. It's relevant to this one. She took a breath. Mr. Thompson, Marcus, I need to apologize. What I said on the plane was inexcusable. But more than that, I need to tell you something. 6 months ago, your daughter sent me a letter. An email, actually. It bounced back because she couldn't find my direct address. She was trying to help you find a better job. Marcus's expression softened slightly. That sounds like Emma. I've told her we're fine. But she worries. She loves you. The feeling's mutual. They stood in awkward silence, sipping coffee. Finally, Victoria pulled out the printed email. She left this behind at the airport. I thought you should have it back. Marcus read his daughter's words, a small smile tugging at his lips. She wrote this at the school library. Told me she was working on a project about businesses. I should have known she was scheming. She called you a hero who doesn't complain. She's 7. Parents are always heroes at 7. No, Victoria said firmly. You're an actual hero. The Kandahar miracle? 57 soldiers? And today? Today I did my job. Marcus interrupted. The job I was trained for. Any military pilot would have done the same. But they weren't there. You were. She paused. Why didn't you defend yourself? When I was cruel, when I made those assumptions? Marcus looked at her with those steady green eyes. Would it have changed anything? You'd made up your mind about who I was the moment you saw my clothes. Besides, I learned a long time ago that explaining your worth to people who can't see it is wasted energy. The words stung because they were true. Victoria had judged him instantly, completely, and wrongly. I want to help, she said. The job Emma wrote about. No. You haven't even heard the offer. I don't need to. His voice was gentle but firm. Emma's been in remission for 2 years. The doctors are optimistic, but she needs consistency. Regular checkups with oncologists who know her case. The same school with teachers who understand when she's having a tough day. Friends who don't see her as the sick kid because they've known her since before. I can't uproot her life for a bigger paycheck. What if you didn't have to uproot anything? Victoria pressed. What if, Daddy? Emma's sleepy voice called from inside the room. I should go, Marcus said. Thank you for the coffee and for returning the letter. He slipped back inside before Victoria could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway with cold coffee and the weight of her inadequacy. Back in her suite, Victoria opened her laptop and began typing. If Marcus Thompson wouldn't accept help directly, she'd have to get creative. She pulled up corporate contracts, aviation regulations, municipal airport listings in Ohio. Somewhere in the intersection of what he needed and what he'd accept was a solution. Her phone rang. James, again. This time she answered. Victoria, thank God the media is going crazy. They're calling Thompson the hero of Flight 407. We need to get you in front of cameras immediately. The narrative is spinning without us. James, shut up and listen. I need you to research municipal airports in Ohio, specifically ones that might benefit from private investment or partnership opportunities. What? Victoria, the board is demanding. The board can wait. This is more important. More important than managing a potential stock crisis? Victoria thought of Emma Thompson, 7 years old with cancer in remission, writing letters to help her hero father. She thought of Marcus turning down 6-figure job offers to stay where his daughter could thrive. She thought of herself, measuring human worth by designer labels and bank balances. Yes, she said simply, more important than all of it. She hung up on her bewildered assistant and went back to work. For the first time in years, Victoria Sterling was building something that wasn't about profit margins or market dominance. She was building a debt repayment plan for a man who'd never ask for payment. The night stretched on, punctuated by the sound of sirens as emergency vehicles continued their work at the airport. In room 512, a little girl slept peacefully, trusting that tomorrow would come because her father always kept his promises. In room 534, that father sat awake, planning a return to normal life that would minimize disruption to his daughter's careful routine. And in the penthouse suite, a billionaire worked through the night, learning that the hardest problems to solve weren't in boardrooms or stock markets, but in the quiet spaces where pride, love, and necessity intersected. Tomorrow, the media would descend in full force. The story would become legend, the humble maintenance worker who saved a plane full of people. But tonight, in a Charleston hotel, 3 lives hung in delicate balance, waiting for morning to reveal what came next. Marcus had landed the plane. Now Victoria had to figure out how to land something far more complicated. Redemption she didn't deserve, and help that wouldn't be accepted. But she was Victoria Sterling. She'd built an empire from ashes. Surely she could build a bridge across pride. The story exploded across media outlets like wildfire. By morning, Marcus Thompson's face was on every news channel, his military photo juxtaposed with grainy cell phone footage of him walking into the cockpit. Hero pilot saves 174, the headlines screamed, from war hero to miracle worker. The interviews with passengers painted a portrait of calm under pressure, of skill meeting destiny at 31,000 feet, but the man himself was nowhere to be found. He checked out at 4 a.m., the hotel desk clerk informed Victoria when she came looking. Paid cash for an Uber, didn't say where they were going. Victoria stood in the lobby, frustrated but not surprised. Of course Marcus would flee the spotlight. He'd spent years hiding his light under a bushel of flannel shirts and maintenance work. Fame was the last thing he wanted. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number with an Ohio area code. Ms. Sterling, this is Grace Chen from Mercy Children's Hospital in Columbus. I'm Emma Thompson's oncology nurse. I'm calling because, well, this is unusual, but Emma insisted I contact you. Victoria's heart skipped. Is she all right? She's fine. They're here for her regular checkup. But she saw you on the news talking about her daddy, and she says you're the pretty lady who needs to say sorry. The nurse sounded embarrassed. I wouldn't normally do this, but Emma can be very persuasive. She wants to know if you'd like to have lunch with them after her appointment. She says, and I quote, "Daddy won't ask, but I will, because someone needs to teach Ms. Sterling about being nice." Despite everything, Victoria found herself smiling. Tell Emma I would be honored to have lunch with them. Where and when? 3 hours and a hastily chartered private jet later, Victoria stood outside a small diner in Columbus, Ohio, her designer outfit replaced with simple slacks and a button-down shirt. Through the window, she could see Marcus and Emma at a corner booth. Emma was coloring on her placemat while Marcus read a newspaper, pointedly ignoring the front-page story about himself. Victoria entered, bell chiming above the door. Emma spotted her immediately. You came. The little girl bounced in her seat. Daddy said you probably wouldn't because rich people are busy. But I said you'd come because you looked sad yesterday. Emma, Marcus warned gently. It's true, Victoria said, sliding into the booth across from them. I was sad. I'm still sad. Because I learned something important yesterday. That I've become someone who judges people by how they look instead of who they are. Emma considered this seriously. That's why you were mean? Because of Daddy's clothes? Yes. That's silly. Clothes are just clothes. Daddy has nice clothes too, but he saves them for special things. Like parent-teacher conferences and my recitals. Emma turned to her father. Tell her about your interview suit, Daddy. Marcus sighed. Emma, it's Tom Ford, Emma announced proudly. From when Daddy used to fly important people. He keeps it in a special bag so it stays nice. He wore it to Mommy's funeral because he said she deserved him looking his best one last time. The casual mention of her mother's death, delivered with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance, hit Victoria harder than anger could have. I'm sorry about your mother, Victoria said softly. She's in heaven, Emma replied. She was sick like me, but her medicine stopped working. That's why Daddy doesn't fly far away anymore. He says I need him close. A waitress appeared, saving them from the weight of the moment. They ordered, Emma enthusiastically choosing chocolate chip pancakes despite Marcus's gentle suggestion of something healthier. She's allowed treats after checkups, he explained to Victoria. Good news deserves celebration. Good news? Victoria asked hopefully. Still in remission, Marcus confirmed. And the relief in his eyes was profound. 26 months and counting. 26 months, 3 days, Emma corrected. I keep track. As they waited for food, Emma chattered about school, her friends, her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, who was the nicest except when Tyler pulls Sarah's hair. She was a bright, engaging child who seemed older than her 7 years in some ways, younger in others. The shadow of illness had given her a wisdom about life's fragility that most children lacked, but she still lit up talking about her favorite cartoon. "Miss Sterling has a big company," Emma announced suddenly. "I researched it at the library. You help people find jobs, right?" Victoria nodded. "Among other things, yes." "My daddy needs a better job," Emma said, ignoring Marcus's sigh. "Not because he's not good at fixing planes. He's the best. Mr. Rodriguez at the airport says Daddy can make any engine purr like a kitty, but it doesn't pay enough for—" She paused, looking at her father uncertainly. "It pays fine, baby girl," Marcus said firmly. "It doesn't pay enough for the house," Emma finished anyway. "I heard you talking to Grandpa. We might have to move to an apartment." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Emma, that's family business. But she can help. That's what her company does." Victoria seized the opening. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. My company has been considering partnerships with regional airports, maintenance training programs, specifically. We'd provide funding and resources in exchange for helping develop skilled technicians who could move into our aerospace division." It was a lie. She'd invented the program at 3 a.m. the night before. But James was already working on making it real. Marcus studied her skeptically. "That's very convenient timing." "Daddy, don't be suspicious. She's trying to help." Emma reached across the table to pat Victoria's hand. "He's not good at accepting help. Mommy used to say he was stubborn." "Stubborn," Marcus corrected automatically. "That's what I said." Their food arrived, and Emma attacked her pancakes with enthusiasm. Victoria picked at her salad, searching for the right words. "The program would be based here in Columbus," she said carefully. "No relocation required. The airport would receive a significant investment, and the lead instructor would be well compensated. 6 figures, full benefits, flexible hours to accommodate family needs." "The lead instructor," Marcus repeated flatly. "Who would need to be someone with military aviation experience and a gift for teaching. I'm told there's someone at the municipal airport who fits that description perfectly." "Daddy." "That's you," Emma said through a mouthful of pancake. "I know what she's doing, baby girl. She's trying to make up for being mean. Mommy said when someone tries to fix a mistake, you should let them." Victoria leaned forward. "Your daughter wrote to me 6 months ago asking for help. I never saw the letter because she couldn't find my direct email. But if I had seen it, I would have ignored it anyway. Because 6 months ago, I was someone who wouldn't have cared about a little girl trying to help her father." She pulled out the printed email, now carefully laminated. "Yesterday, your father saved my life. Not because I deserved it, not because I was kind to him, but because that's who he is. I've spent my entire career measuring success in dollars and market share. But your father's success is sitting right here, eating too many chocolate chips and trying to broker a deal between adults who are too proud to make it themselves." Emma beamed. "I am eating too many chocolate chips." Marcus read his daughter's letter, his expression softening. When he looked up, some of the defensive walls had lowered. "This program of yours," he said slowly, "it's real? Not just something you're creating out of guilt?" "It's real as of about 6 hours ago," Victoria admitted. "My team is drawing up contracts now. We're calling it the Veterans Aviation Transition Initiative. FATI for short. You'd be our pilot program, pardon the pun. If it works, we expand to other airports, other veterans. And if it doesn't work, then I've invested in something worthwhile that failed. It wouldn't be the first time." She paused. "But I don't think it will fail. Not with you running it." Emma had gone quiet, watching the adults with those 2 wise eyes. "Are you going to say yes, Daddy?" Marcus looked at his daughter, the little girl who'd written letters to strangers trying to help him, who faced cancer with the bravery of a soldier, who needed stability and security, and a father who wasn't worried about making rent. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "That's not a no," Emma cheered. "When Daddy says he needs to think, it usually means yes, but he wants to be careful. You know me too well, baby girl." They finished lunch with lighter conversation. Emma showed Victoria her coloring, a purple airplane with flowers on the wings. and Marcus gradually relaxed enough to share a few stories from the airport. Normal stories, nothing about his military service or heroics. Just small moments of satisfaction in bringing dead engines back to life. As they prepared to leave, Emma tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "Miss Sterling, I forgive you for being mean. Daddy taught me that holding mad feelings makes your heart sick, and you said sorry and tried to fix it, so we're okay now." Victoria knelt to Emma's level, overwhelmed by the simple grace of childish forgiveness. "Thank you, Emma. That means more than you know. Also," Emma added seriously, "if you give Daddy a job, maybe you could visit sometimes. You're prettier when you smile, and you didn't smile once on the airplane until Daddy saved everyone." Marcus covered his face with one hand. "Emma, we've talked about saying everything you think. But it's true." As they parted ways in the parking lot, Marcus carrying Emma to their 10-year-old Honda Civic, Victoria made a decision. "The offer stands," she called out. "No expiration date. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, it's there." Marcus paused, looking back. "Why does this matter so much to you?" Victoria thought of all the complex reasons, the guilt and revelation and desperate need to prove she could be better than the person who'd mocked a hero for his flannel shirt. But in the end, the answer was simple. "Because your daughter believes people can change," she said, "and I'd like to prove her right." The drive back to the airport was quiet. Emma had fallen asleep in her booster seat, exhausted from the hospital visit and excitement. Marcus watched the Ohio countryside roll by, thinking about offers and opportunities and the weight of pride versus pragmatism. At a red light, he glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping daughter. Emma had fought cancer with a smile. The least he could do was fight his own stubborn pride. By the time Victoria's jet lifted off from Columbus, her phone was buzzing with a text from that same unknown Ohio number. "Let's talk details, but I have conditions. M." Victoria smiled, looking down at the city falling away beneath her. Somewhere down there, a 7-year-old girl was probably dreaming of purple airplanes and chocolate chip pancakes. Secure in the knowledge that her daddy could fix anything, even stubborn hearts that had forgotten how to see past designer labels. The hero of Flight 447 had landed more than a plane. He'd landed Victoria Sterling squarely in the truth of her own limitations. And Emma Thompson, cancer survivor and part-time matchmaker, had shown her how to fly again. 6 months later, the Columbus Municipal Airport hummed with new energy. Fresh paint gleamed on hangar walls, state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment filled the maintenance bays, and a steady stream of veterans arrived for the VATI program that had exceeded all projections. At the center of it all, Marcus Thompson moved with quiet authority, teaching battle-tested pilots how to transition their skills to civilian aviation. Victoria Sterling stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed training center, watching Marcus guide a former Navy pilot through a complex engine rebuild. He taught with the same calm precision he'd shown landing Flight 447, patient, thorough, never raising his voice even when mistakes were made. "Ms. Sterling?" She turned to find James, her assistant, looking uncharacteristically emotional. "What is it?" "The quarterly reports. The VATI program isn't just successful, it's transformational. We've placed 47 veterans in aviation positions. The retention rate is 98%. Companies are begging to partner with us." He paused. "The board wants to expand nationwide. They're calling it your finest achievement." Victoria looked back at Marcus, who was now laughing at something his student had said. "It's not my achievement, it's his. Ma'am, there's something else. That investigation you asked me to conduct privately, about the Thompson family finances." James handed her a folder. "I think you need to see this." Victoria opened the folder and felt her heart stop. Medical bills, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth. Not for Emma, whose treatment was covered by insurance and charitable programs. These were for Sarah Thompson, Marcus's late wife, whose experimental treatments hadn't been covered. Marcus had sold everything: his house, his investments, his Tom Ford suits, except the one he'd kept for her funeral. He'd taken the maintenance job not just for the stable hours, but because the county benefits would protect Emma if her cancer returned. He wasn't just a hero who'd given up glory for his daughter. He was a man who'd sacrificed everything. living on the edge of financial ruin, never complaining, never asking for help. There's more, James said quietly. The house they're about to lose? It's already in foreclosure. The bank filed papers yesterday. He's been hiding it from Emma. Victoria closed the folder, decision made. James, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. 20 minutes later, she knocked on the door of Marcus's small office. He looked up from student evaluations, surprised. Victoria, I wasn't expecting you today. I was in town. Thought I'd check on the program. She entered, closing the door behind her. Actually, that's a lie. I came to tell you something. Marcus set down his pen, giving her his full attention. In 6 months, they'd developed a careful friendship, built on mutual respect, and Emma's insistence that Victoria join them for dinner at least once a month. There's been a complication with the program structure, Victoria began. Legal says the lead instructor position comes with certain requirements we didn't anticipate. Housing requirements specifically. His face went carefully neutral. Housing requirements. Insurance liability. The program director needs to live in approved housing. Something about emergency response times and security clearances. She pulled out a set of keys. So we've acquired a property. 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, good school district, walking distance from the hospital for Emma's checkups. Marcus stared at the keys. Victoria, it's not charity. It's a job requirement. The house stays with the position, like a parsonage for a minister or base housing for military. She placed the keys on his desk. Of course, if you'd prefer to find your own approved housing, that's fine too. But this one's available immediately. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You know? I know. I didn't want... I know that too. She sat across from him. Marcus, you saved 174 lives. You've trained 47 veterans who were struggling to find their place. You're raising an incredible daughter alone. When does it become okay to accept help? When Emma needs it, he said simply. And she needs this. She loves that house. Cried for a week when I told her we might have to move. Then take it. Not for you. For her. He picked up the keys, weighing them in his hand. The board approved this? The board approved a housing allowance commensurate with the position's importance. What I do with that allowance is my business. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, this isn't about Flight 447. This is about Emma's letter. She asked me to help her daddy, and I'm a woman who keeps her promises. Even if it takes me 6 months to figure out how. That evening, Victoria received a text. A photo of Emma dancing in the doorway of their house. Mr. Peanuts raised triumphantly above her head. The message read simply, "She says you're her fairy godmother. I'm beginning to agree. May." 3 weeks later, Victoria was in her Manhattan office when James burst in without knocking, a breach of protocol so unusual she immediately knew something was wrong. "Turn on the news, now." She did, and her blood chilled. A small plane had crashed in rural Ohio. Emergency responders were racing to the scene. The pilot was reported to be a flight instructor from Columbus Municipal Airport. "It's not him," James said quickly. "But Victoria, Emma was supposed to be on a field trip today, to the airport. They were doing demonstration flights for the kids." Victoria was moving before he finished speaking, barking orders as she ran. "Get the jet ready. Clear my schedule. Find out everything. Passenger list. Emma's whereabouts. Everything." The flight to Columbus was the longest hour of her life. She landed to chaos, news vans, emergency vehicles, terrified parents gathering at the airport. She pushed through the crowd, searching, and finally saw them. Marcus stood near the crash site, but he wasn't watching the rescue efforts. He was kneeling beside Emma, who was comforting a crying classmate. Safe, whole, on the ground where she belonged. The demonstration schedule changed, someone explained to Victoria. Emma's class was supposed to go up, but Captain Thompson pulled them at the last minute, said the weather felt wrong. The next group, they trailed off. Victoria approached slowly, not wanting to intrude, but Emma spotted her. "Miss Sterling, did you see? Daddy saved everyone again. He said the plane didn't sound right and wouldn't let us fly. Tyler's mad because he wanted to go, but I told him Daddy knows about plane sounds. Marcus stood, meeting Victoria's eyes. Just instinct. Something felt off. But Victoria saw the truth in his expression. He'd known. Somehow he'd known danger was coming and had protected the children, including his own. "I'm glad you're safe," she said simply. "Both of you." Later, after the crash site was cleared and the shaken families had gone home, Victoria found herself sitting with Marcus and Emma in their living room, the house she'd quietly saved, now filled with Emma's drawings and photos of Sarah Thompson. "I was so scared," Victoria admitted. "When I thought, but we're okay," Emma said, patting her hand with 7-year-old wisdom. "Daddy always keeps us safe. That's what he does." Marcus was quiet, staring at a photo of his late wife. "Sarah used to say I had a guardian angel, that I could sense trouble before it happened. Saved my squadron more than once." He looked at his daughter. "Now I think that angel is her, making sure I'm still here for Emma." They sat in comfortable silence. 3 lives bound together by circumstances none of them could have imagined. The hero who'd given up glory for love. The billionaire learning that wealth meant nothing without humanity. The little girl who'd written a letter that changed everything. "Miss Sterling?" Emma said suddenly. "I have something for you." She ran to her room and returned with a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a framed drawing. A purple airplane with 3 stick figures standing in front of it. "That's Daddy. That's me, and that's you. Because you're family now." Victoria's eyes burned. She'd built an empire, commanded boardrooms, bent industries to her will, but this simple drawing from a 7-year-old girl was worth more than all of it. "Hey," Emma added, "want to see something cool? Daddy kept a secret." "Emma." "No," Marcus warned, but she was already pulling him toward the garage. There, under a dust cover, was the last thing Victoria expected. A sleek motorcycle, pristine despite its age. "Daddy used to race," Emma announced. "Before I was born. He was really good, but he stopped when Mommy got sick. He keeps it to remember being young." Marcus ran a hand over the bike's chrome. "Haven't ridden in 8 years. Keep meaning to sell it, but it's part of who you were," Victoria finished. "Before loss changed everything." He nodded. "Sarah loved watching me race. Said I was poetry in motion." He smiled at the memory. "I was different then. Cockier. Thought I was invincible." "You're still invincible," Emma protested. "Just in different ways." That night, as Victoria prepared to fly back to New York, she stood on the tarmac looking at her jet. 6 months ago, she'd been a different person. Cold, cruel, measuring worth in dollars. Now she understood that true worth was in the connections between people, in the quiet heroism of daily sacrifice, in the love between a father and daughter who'd lost so much but still found reasons to smile. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Emma wants to know if you'll come for Thanksgiving. Fair warning. I cook about as well as I sing, which is to say, poorly." Victoria typed back, "I'll bring dessert. I'll bring... and maybe some backup dishes." Smart woman. See you then. As her jet lifted off, Victoria looked down at the lights of Columbus. Somewhere below, a little girl was getting ready for bed, secure in her father's love and her home's safety. A father was checking on his daughter one more time, the way he'd probably do every night for the rest of his life. And in New York, a billionaire was planning her first real Thanksgiving in years, with the family she'd found in the most unexpected way. The news cycle had moved on from the hero of Flight 447. Other stories, other miracles, other tragedies filled the headlines. But in the quiet spaces between the noise, 3 lives continued their orbit around each other, forever changed by 20 minutes of terror in the sky and the choices that followed. Marcus Thompson had landed a plane and saved 174 lives. But in the end, his greatest save had been Victoria Sterling herself, pulled from the wreckage of her own cold ambition and taught to fly again by a 7-year-old girl with cancer. A worn flannel shirt, and a love that saw past the surface to the heart beneath. And in a small house in Columbus, Ohio, a purple drawing hung on the refrigerator, 3 stick figures standing before an airplane, a family forged not by blood, but by grace, forgiveness, and the understanding that heroes come in all forms. Sometimes they wear medals, sometimes they wear designer suits, and sometimes they're 7 years old and clutching a stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts, teaching broken adults how to be whole again. The greatest rescue of Flight 447 hadn't been the landing at all. It had been what happened after.